No, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you for the warm welcome. So today's topic is the subject English in IGCSE and IBMYP DP. Let's look at the agenda. I hope I'm audible. Okay. So we'll understand the requirements of IGCSE and IB. What are some of the expectations of Cambridge IGCSE and International Baccalaureate? IB stands for International Baccalaureate. How IGCSE curriculum or program is aligned with IBDP? And what are some of the skill sets that are common between IGCSE and IBDP? And finally, since I'm an English facilitator for the last 12 years, so we will also look at how does the subject English look like in IGCSE and IB MYP DP. Okay, first of all, about the IB. So as you can see, International Baccalaureate or IB is a global leader in international education, and they emphasizes on inquiry-based teaching. They look at students to gain knowledge, and they look into the inquiry style of teaching and learning. The facilitators of IB are encouraged to ask the right kind of questions instead of providing ready-made answers. And in this process, the IB hopes that the facilitators will develop knowledgeable, confident, and caring young people. Their programs, PYP, MYP, DP, CP. I'll just quickly elaborate what does each stand for. PYP is primary years program. This is till grade 5. MYP stands for middle year program, which is still from grade 6 to grade 10. DP is their diploma program, and they have of late also started career related program, which the students can take up immediately after their grade 10. The career related program is a more specialized kind of program where very specific subject areas are being offered so that the students are prepared for higher education. Now, what about Cambridge IGCSE? So first of all, it is an international examination with worldwide recognition and credibility. And just like IB board, it also demands the questioning and discovery method of learning, the inquiry-based method of learning, finding answers to the situation rather than providing answers. So as aspiring IB or IGCSE educators, you should focus on your teaching style to be more inquiry-driven rather than just ready-made, serving answer. Also, IGCSE provides excellent preparation for the International Baccalaureate Diploma Program. It's well aligned with the expectations of IBDP, which is offered in grade 11 and 12, and IGCSE is offered in grade 9 and 10. So if a student, as I mentioned in my slides, if a student have taken IGCSE program in their grade 9 and 10, they are well familiar with the styles of learning and expectations of IBDP. Now, let's come to my subject, which is how does English in Cambridge IGCSE looks like? So primarily the schools, mostly in India, they offer two subjects under English in Cambridge IGCSE, which is first language English, popularly known as FLE. This is the subject code. So in all the subject guides, even if you do just a regular search of FLE, you can also put in the subject guide to make sure that you arrive at the correct subject guide. And the second subject with no particular order they offer is literature in English, this is again the subject code. Now, it depends on school. If the school has some non-native English speakers who are not fluent, suppose if in a school in India or in Delhi, you have couple of Korean students, couple of Chinese students. IGCSE also offers English as second language, but it entirely depends on the number of students coming from a different country with a specific need. Therefore, I've just put these two popularly, widely taught subjects in today's slide, and I'll be focusing on this only. Okay, let's come to first language English. And as the name suggests, it is about the language study. Okay, so it offers candidates the opportunity to respond with understanding to a rich array of reading text during the course as a whole. And those texts, these are, since it's a language paper, these texts will be non-literary in style. So you would expect to indulge in teaching of speech writing, article writing, report writing, journal writing. These are all non-literary work. There is no literature happening here. You're not reading stories. Okay. FLE or first language English has two papers. Let's understand the paper wise bifurcation. The beauty of IGCSE is that it goes paper wise. So it has a very university style of the design of IGCSE, right? Something that we have studied in our undergrad course if we've done in bachelor's in English. So paper one is about reading. That's the name of the paper. This is the total marks, 80 marks, and the duration of 2 hours. Also, before I proceed, I would like to tell you that IGCSE, which is offered at the beginning of grade 9, is a 2-year program. So anything that you will see now, just keep in mind that it's a 2-year program. So all the course, all the non-literary texts, the skills are being taught in the span of 2 years, just like in a very university style of fashion. So you really don't have to sort of finish everything in a year. Unlike the national curriculum, you have 2 years. In fact, 1.5 years, because the last 6 months is the preparation for Cambridge board examination, which the students write at the end of their grade 10. All right. So paper one is about reading. It's 80 marks. It's 2 hours. Some of the questions that the candidates can expect in this paper is comprehension task. So it's a very basic question where the candidates have to read a text and they need to answer the question. It's the most scoring part of this paper. The emphasis here is to find out not just the explicit meanings which are there in the text, but also to look at the implicit meanings, also to look at the implied ideas that are conveyed in the text. The next is summary task. Again, it's a challenging yet a very scoring aspect of this paper, because the candidates are encouraged to summarize a text. Again, it's an excerpt given, it's a passage given, maybe a descriptive passage, maybe a factual passage, and the candidates are required to summarize it in just 100 to 120 words, which is again a difficult skill, a challenging skill to teach the students, because to become a good writer, you have to become a good editor. Now that is a little challenging. The second last is the language task, where the candidates are required to find out antonyms, synonyms from the passage given, and to also elaborate on contextual meaning of certain words or phrases. As the name suggests, is the language task. This is to focus on the linguistic part of the question. The last question of this paper is extended response to reading, and based on the passage given, the candidate has to respond in one of the following text types, which is letter, report, journal, speech, interview, and article. So as an FLE, first language English facilitator, what we require is to teach the students the conventions of all these text types, number one. Number two, also to keep in mind who is the audience, right? And what kind of tone we should maintain. If it's a journal that we're writing, journal is mostly a reflective style of writing. So the tone could be very candid, very spontaneous. However, if it's a report and you're writing for a newspaper report, so the tone should be very matter of fact, very business-like, right? So as FLE facilitators, we need to train the students to keep in mind the tone, the formality of the situation, and depending on that, pick up the vocabulary accordingly, use the word choice accordingly. Because students, they kind of, because it's a very thin line about who is the audience, what is the purpose, what should be the ideal tone for this kind of text type, which is something the IGCSE FLE expects from the facilitators to train the students. The second paper, paper 2, is directed writing and composition. Again, 80 marks, 2 hours papers. Since you can see, as the name suggests, that it's directed writing and composition. So this paper is more about writing. When I say writing, I mean creative writing. Whereas paper 1 is about reading. So the candidates are expected to read all the passages very, very carefully, whether the candidate can pick up the implied meanings, the implicit ideas conveyed in the text, as I mentioned before. So this paper mostly focus on the reading part, whereas this paper mostly focus on the writing part. So in directed writing, the candidates write a discursive, argumentative, persuasive speech. Now, if you look at all these kind of format of the text type, discursive has different expectation. Again, the word choice has to be different. The stance, the evaluation style has to be different. Argumentative requires a lot of to and fro between different kind of ideas. So this is more on how well you use certain connectives, how well you connect different ideas to form a strong argument. Again, it boils down to the writing style. Then this paper also has some bit of creative writing, which the candidates really enjoy doing, which is narrative writing, which is story writing, and descriptive writing. All right. Okay. Let's come to IGCSE Literature in English, which is the another subject which is offered under Cambridge IGCSE. The aims of these subjects are to enjoy the experience of reading literature, and most importantly, if you can see, respond to literary text in different forms and from different periods and cultures. So the candidates read short stories, they read novels, they read drama, they read poetry, they read anthology of one solid poet also. I mean, there's an array of choices. So as an English teacher, and most importantly, as a literature enthusiast, this becomes, whatever experience I have, dear audience, this becomes the most fulfilling course to teach as an English teacher. I'll show you the kind of text that IGCSE recommends. So again, you have 3 papers in here. You have paper 1, which is poetry and prose. Now, IGCSE gives you every 2 years, IGCSE comes up with a syllabus. And within that syllabus, they give a lot of options. So for this paper, for this time, you have these poems, right? And section A is poetry. So all these 10 poems need to be, all these 15 poems need to be taught for section A poetry. Either you can take this for section A poetry, or you can take, as I mentioned, one solid poem, a poet and his poems. So you can actually IGCSE encourages the facilitator to sit with the cohort, understand the requirements of the cohort. The batch might want to read different types of poems across poets. You can see, look at the choices that the poets have, or you can pick up one solid poet like Ted Hughes and talk about his body of work. So it entirely depends on what you want to have with your students. So this is paper 1, section A, with 2 choices. You can take either these poems, or you can take Ted Hughes' body of work. Now, section B is prose of this poem. Either you can take one novel. Look at the choices of novel, from Jhumpa Lahiri to Adichie to Charles Dickens, to classic like Charles Dickens, to a Gothic novel like Rebecca. You can take, or to a contemporary novel like Life of Pi by Martin. So either you can take one of these, or you can take these 10 short stories. Again, it boils down to what probably you are passionate about as a literature enthusiast, or what is the beat of the cohort that you got, right? So this is section B, prose of paper 1. Now, paper 2 is the drama paper. So either candidate can take 2 drama text from paper 2. Look at again the choices. So you have Shakespeare, you have Sheriff. So these are different kind of choices. And paper 3, if the school is taking paper 3, they have to take up 1 drama text from again these choices. So paper 4 is the unseen paper. Candidates, they get either an unseen poem or a prose extract to write a literary commentary. Now, the expectation is that the skills that you learn in paper 1, which is poetry and prose, and these are your seen text. These, by seen text, I mean that these are the texts that are being discussed in classroom. You discuss these classes, so you impart some very specific skill-based teaching. The same skills that you have while teaching all these poems and prose, IGCSE expects the students to apply those skills in analyzing an unseen poem or a prose text, right? So it's like the transfer of skills that you teach in one paper can be automatically fitted into this paper of unseen. Now, possible routes. What I mean is that all IGCSE, there's a mandate that all candidates take paper 1, poetry and prose. That's the mandatory paper. Okay. And along with it, either you can take paper 2, which is the drama paper, but in paper 2, you have to cover 2 drama text. Or you can take paper 3, which means 1 drama text and the unseen. So it also depends on the school which route that they want to take. But paper 1 is a mandatory paper. All the candidates have to take paper 1, right? Okay, some joys of teaching IGCSE English. First of all, it's a structured pattern. As I said, there is some structure given to you. Like there has to be, you have to teach paper 1. You have to teach certain number of poems or a novel or a prose, right? So there is some structure to it. But there is a huge array of literary and non-literary text to explore in FLE and literature. And creative writing, as I mentioned, is an integral part of the curriculum, which you get to teach and explore with your students. So if you want to teach, because you're teaching descriptive writing in first language English, so I might as well take them out in the open field and maybe give them a picture that you might have clicked from your mobile camera and ask them to write a short descriptive paragraph on that. So there are a lot of creative ideas that you can do in your pedagogy style also. And what I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation is this 2-year course gives one the flexibility to engage in meaningful collaborative learning experience and move beyond classroom. For example, if you're doing a novel which has a historical, like Adichie's novel, Purple Hibiscus, if you're teaching that, so you might want to call somebody who has, you might want to collaborate with the history department of your school, who can, the history facilitator, and come and talk about the Nigerian post-colonial scenario, which is a very important element to understand Adichie's Purple Hibiscus. So you can do all these collaborative stuff also. And the fact is that you have 2 years time and you can actually have some really interdisciplinary learning experience for your cohort. Let's come to the IBMYP language and literature. While IGCSE gives you a structured, with definitely a lot of choices going around, IBMYP language, and MYP stands for middle year program, right? And it's a fine balance of language and literature. And it offers a study of wide range of literary and non-literary text types, writing styles, and techniques. So more or less, somewhere the aims are similar, if not same. Now, what is the difference? So IBMYP has these 16 key concepts, and the one that are in bold are reserved for language and literature course, because MYP offers other subjects also, mathematics, individual society, science, and all of that. So out of the 16 key concepts, these are the 4 reserved for MYP Language and Literature, the English people: communication, creativity, connections, perspective, right? And these are the related concept for, again, MYP Language and Literature. I'll just pause here for some time so that you can look at it. So character, context, genre, style, theme, anything which is related to writing and literature. Then global context is the same for all the subjects offered by IB. These are the common global context. And as the name suggests, look at it. These are broader in nature: identities and relationships, orientation in space and time, personal and cultural expression. So this context can be applied to English, also can be applied to a history classroom also, right? So we have studied GC, which is global context, related concept RC, and key concept KC. So KC, GC, RC. These are some of the common abbreviations in the world of IB, MYP. Now, with the help of KC, GC, RC, you form your statement of inquiry. Now, what is statement of inquiry? It set conceptual understanding in a global context in order to frame classroom inquiry and direct purposeful learning. So what happens in IGCSE, while IGCSE will give you recommendations, as you saw in the previous slides, so there are 2 texts of Shakespeare, there's 1 text of Jhumpa Lahiri, you can take one of them. IB MYP does not right away specify the authors. Rather, they give you these concepts and they tell the IB MYP facilitators to design a unit which is around one of the key concept, one of the related or 2 of the related concept, and 1 global context. And MYP is again a 5-year-old program, which is starts at grade 6 and it ends at grade 10. And in the end of grade 10, the students appear for MYP assessment, which is a culmination of what all they have learned starting from their grade 6. So as IB MYP facilitators of any subject, we have to make sure that we give them enough unit exposure which cover all these RC, KC, and of course GC, right? So just an example. So this could be a statement of inquiry: historical context shape literary genre, right? The key concept that we have picked is connections, context, genres, orientation in space and time. And these are the possible project or study that you can take up. Historical fiction, where you can study Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet, Persepolis, which is a graphic novel, right? This is more literature based. Now, what about the language? So this is the statement of inquiry. And what are the KC, GC, RC? Communication, purpose, audience, personal cultural expression. So advertising unit, where you can look into the persuasive style of writing, look into some print advertisements and how they persuade and manipulate the audience, right? So MYP will not give you a structured pattern. MYP will just broadly define these are the concepts, this much time you have, and make sure that the students in these 4 years at least, before they sit for their board exam, they get the exposure of all these concepts, all these global contexts, and all these literary genre and non-literary text types also. So you got to make sure as MYP facilitator that you're teaching poetry, you're teaching drama, you're teaching prose, you're teaching speech, article, you're teaching how to analyze documentaries, all of that. So it's a huge task on IB MYP facilitators, especially when there are just, it's just driven by concepts. There is no structured pattern. While there can be charm in that also, but there are days when you miss that pattern, a structured pattern which you just readily can follow. And finally, I'll just quickly finish IBDP Language and Literature. So IB middle year program is till grade 10. And then IB offers diploma program, which is DP stands for diploma program. Now, every DP subject is studied either at HL, which is higher level, or SL, which is standard level. Again, the aim is, if you look at it, range of text in a variety of media and forms from different periods, styles, and culture. And you have to develop skills in interpretation, analysis, and evaluation of the candidates. How well they're not writing a speech, rather they should know how to analyze a speech. They're not writing, they're not designing a print ad. They should know what makes this print ad convincing enough and persuasive enough. That should be the aim as DP or IB facilitators. So the SL students, they read 4 literary works studied in total, and the HL student, they, as the name suggests, higher level, 6 literary works. Let's understand, look at the slide and understand the different, the array, the spectrum of text that the candidates will have exposure. And as a teacher, you would also have to make a very difficult, I would not say difficult, very interesting reading grid for your cohort. So your SL student, if you look at it, should read 1 literary work in translation from prescribed reading list, PRL. Now, IBDP offers a prescribed reading list. In that reading list, they do not offer the name of the text. Rather, they would offer the name of the author. So you would see Tagore there, Rabindranath Tagore. And if Tagore is there, that means, okay, Tagore is an author which is there on PRL. That means you can teach Tagore any work of Tagore. That could be poem, that could be drama, that could be short stories, right? So 1 minimum literary work in translation from PRL. HL students, they have to read 2 literary works in translation, right? And similarly for SL, 1 literary work in English, 2 literary works in English from the PRL. Then SL student, 2 literary works freely chosen probably by the teacher. So look at the choice that diploma programs gives to the teachers. And of course, you should get in touch with your cohort and you should discuss that, listen, I am thinking to take up this text, which is a free choice, which is not there in the PRL also, but it's a great meaty, it has the literary merit. And let's take it up and let's analyze it as a class. But it's actually a very exciting opportunity, as I mentioned, for the literature teachers and literature enthusiasts. And similarly, the HL students, they study 2 literary works freely chosen, right? Now, what the reading grid that I was mentioning, look at the reading grid that the teachers have to come up with the cohort. The SL students, you make sure that they at least cover 2 literary genres, 2 historical period, 2 places, and 2 continents. So when you're making that grid, it's a very, very exhaustive experience, because you're just not making grid. You have to make sure the whole bucket list should be adhered to. And for the HL people, it's 3 literary genre, 3 historical periods, 3 places, and 2 continents. So this kind of conversation with your cohort, I think it's the most exciting conversation that you can have at the beginning of your diploma program course. Again, DP is also a 2-year program, 11th and 12th. Okay, assessment and IBDP, some of the paper. So paper 1 is their guided textual analysis, which is an unseen non-literary extracts or text. So either they can be given a print advertisement to analyze, or they can be given sorry.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Ma'am, so many questions have lined up. If you are ready to take the questions, or do you have any more slides to present?
Yeah. Tell me.
Okay. Are you done with the PPT, or you need?
Yes. This is assessment in IBDP. I think it's self-explanatory. Paper 2 is again a comparative essay. HL essay is just for the HL students, and individual oral is an oral examination where the students pick up a literary text and a non-literary text, and they talk about a common global issue. Then I have the last. I think I've already covered this, that some joys of teaching IBMYP, that it gives you the autonomy in picking text, but you have to very, very careful. Actually, picking text and a judicious choice of text types, it boils down to the knowledge and your own reading style also, because the text that you choose, of course, it has to fit into the requirements of the KC, RC, GC, or the DP requirements. But something that you can passionate about, you can also put that in that reading grid. So while it is not structured like IGCSE, the underlying difference, before I just close this session, the underlying difference between IGCSE and IB is that IGCSE give you the structure. IGCSE tells you that these are the 15 poems, or this is the poet and his or her anthology you can take. That kind of very defined structure is slightly missing in IBDP. Now, that can be challenging also on days, and that can be exciting also on days. Yeah.
So thank you. Can you close the PPT and expand your camera screen, please, so that the viewers can have a proper look? Yeah. So nice session, Ms. Sneha. Like you have, elaborately explained about everything, the international curriculum. And, we have a couple of questions lined up. Most of the questions are already covered by you.
Okay.
The first question is, what provides you the fuel to keep you going on in full steam as an educator?
I think when I enter a classroom, I know that it's my passion to teach literature, because I think literature is, I hate to say it, but literature is a very doormat kind of a subject. It's treated, especially by today's era. Either they have simplified it, or this is just a novel and we'll just read it, or they just like, okay, there is nothing to do in this. This is not the science or the math of the subject choices, which requires a lot of logical interpretation. So when I enter a classroom, I tell them that I agree that it might not need the rigor which a science or which a mathematics subject would require, but this subject will teach you about life. This subject will calm you down, will soothe you. This subject will also propel you to ask difficult questions to yourself, to the society around, and maybe unlearn some things, look at things with a different perspective. Because in the literature classroom, we end up discussing some very, very awkward ideas also. We end up discussing gender, identity, religion, and how these ideas are changing. And I don't think so these kind of ideas are discussed in any other branch of study, with all due respect to all the other subject areas. So yes, that keeps me going, because I know that this is something, of course, maybe not logical, but it has an emotional streak to it. And I think that is needed to make a change in the society, because logic, reasoning, yes, okay, kudos, let it happen. But who is talking about in developing the emotional quotient of the learners? I don't think so. We are guilty of not involving in that.
Right. So how do you implement technology to engage and support English language learning?
I sometimes try to show them some TED talk before I start with any text. I think the TED Ed lessons provide some very insightful TED talks, especially when you're starting. Recently, I started a text by Satrapi, who is a French-Iranian author, and she wrote this graphic novel Persepolis. So I started with her, how her early years in Iran war. So some kind of face to the author is also required to form that connect. And then flipped classrooms work really well. I give them the topics, the broad topics, and I tell them that either you come up with, because these kids, they love digital intervention a lot. So I tell them that either you make maybe an infographic on how the gender roles are being explored in this text, maybe make a 2 minutes sort of a video. Some group, I ask them to make a podcast. So a little bit of here and there through all these digital virtual intervention has helped me a lot. I did try also to pick up Quizlet and all these flashcards work, but honestly, that did not work with the senior students. I think they need more of a challenge. So they really enjoy doing podcasts. They really enjoyed, making like this asynchronous video and just putting it across, playing it in the classroom, because they get very excited when they see them on the screen with their friends. It's a collaborative, collective experience. So yes, the Quizlets and the flashcards really did not work with the senior kids. But this kind of making podcasts, making infographic on Canva, or forming a interview questionnaire and asking certain questions to maybe some faculty members, depending on the text, depending on the themes of the text, has helped me.
Okay. So what cultural insights can you get from teaching English in an international curriculum?
Oh, a lot. I think every text comes with its cultural baggage, and every text sort of is an eye opener that how diverse the world is, and how varied the thought processes are across the globe. So recently, when I was teaching Adichie's Purple Hibiscus, now there was a time when I read Adichie's Purple Hibiscus, and that was for my reading. Now, there is a difference when you read a text for your own reading, for your soul nourishment, and when you read a text to teach, because then you put the critical lens of the literary nuances that you should consider before you get into a literature filled classroom. So there we end up discussing the Nigerian history, the post-colonial, how that looks like, and what is especially the role of father in a Nigerian household. So more than cultural, I think there are a lot of times you really don't know that what chord you will touch in terms of not just culture, their religion, their religious ideas, their own emotional, personal beliefs. When you're talking about all these conversations, while they could be very involving, but they could also trigger a lot of memories or experiences for students.
Yeah. So because of the time crunch, like I'm not able to cover all the questions, Ms. Neha. One last question I would like to ask you is, what are the most important changes in education that you think need to happen in the next 5 years?
I think okay, while we again I understand that there are I might sound a little biased here, but being a parent also, I've seen that mostly the parents, especially in the formative years of a child's education, they're mostly focused on, of course, reading, and of course, but I think we should also focus on building the literary bent of mind for a child, and the right kind of intervention and the right kind of involvement should be there when it comes to building that literary bent of mind. We are more into math or science or the logical part of the brain, but what all are we doing about the social emotional learning? Yes, thankfully of late schools have recognized that there is a huge need for a curriculum as rigorous for social and emotional learning. So you will see a lot of schools coming up with SEL. In fact, in our own lesson plans, we are being told by IB also that how you can infuse international mindedness, which is acceptance of all the differences that are prevalent in any individual or all individuals, right? So how can, as a facilitator, how can I tweak my lesson plan where I can really have some streaks of conversations on how to become a socially emotionally strong person, or how to have a more acceptance and tolerance for people coming from different kind of background. So I think that all the stakeholders in the education business / industry needs to put their heart and mind into this direction. I think then it will be a wholesome experience.
Right. So thanks for the very informative session, Ms. Sneha.
Thank
School
you.
Journal of Education and schoolreformer.com. Thank you for the talk and for patiently answering all the questions, ma'am. We also thank the audience for participating in the event. We will end the session now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
You too.